Good afternoon. Welcome everybody. This is our monthly seminar on Central Asia and especially on religion in Central Asia. This is a program that is funded by the Henry Luce Foundation. And so we have been having seminars on religion in Eurasia globally since already 18 months, something like that. And we are very happy today to have Liliya Karimova with us. Liliya defending her PhD on Tatarstan. And she is now a postdoctoral fellow. She's continuing her research on Islam in Tatarstan, and she's also a professorial lecturer in communication here at GW in another department, not here. And we are very happy to have her here, and she will be presenting her current research on private life in public spaces, discourse, Ummah, and Muslim piety in Tatarstan.
Thank you very much for such a generous introduction, Marlene. I really look forward to your feedback, comments, and questions at the end. So let me begin. When I called Amina upon my arrival in Kazan during Ramadan this past summer, I told her I needed to see her. As you well know, Amina Apa is a culturally polite way of addressing an older woman in Tatarstan and also Central Asia. A Tatar friend now living in the US gave me some money to pass on to the needy families in Tatarstan. The friend made one condition, not to give the money to a mosque, but directly to those in need. I had met Aminapa during my extended fieldwork in Kazan in 2010, and I knew that she was just the right person to help me find those needy families. A practicing Muslim Tatar in her late 40s at the time, in 2010, Aminapa worked at a factory and was a student at the Muhammadiyya Madrasa, one of Kazan's Muslim higher educational institutions. She also had attended informal religious lessons at one of Kazan's mosques, the Nurullah Mosque, where I met her. At the time, I was collecting practicing Muslim Tatar women's stories about their paths to Muslim piety, what I call piety stories. Upon my request, Aminapa told me her story then and there. I was immediately struck by her honesty. She told me things that one is unlikely to share with a stranger, by the intensity of her emotions and by the strength of her religious belief. In that respect, she broke cultural norms of outward humbleness, patience, calmness, and composure under any circumstances, the norms expected of a Tatar woman of her age and older. Aminapa's turn to Muslim piety took place during the painful post-Soviet transition, marked not only by economic struggles but by the social upheaval, a rise in crime, disintegration of existing social values, and a search for new ones. Exemplified in Tatarstan, for example, by the sovereignty movement at the grassroots level. None of this left Aminapa's family untouched. In a relatively short period of time, she lost one of her two children, divorced her husband, abandoned her lifelong profession as a music teacher. When she stood in front of me during our first meeting in 2010, in the hallway of the Nurullah Mosque, she was tired and pale, modestly dressed in a long loose dress, and wore a headscarf that was carefully tied around her head and neck. In that respect, she also stood out from the women that were part of her mosque lessons group. While close to her in age and also dressed to exhibit a required degree of modesty, the other women wore clothes that would pass for regular or non-Muslim clothes at other occasions and other social settings. Many had their headscarves tied in the back, perhaps temporarily for the duration of the mosque lesson only. Some wore bright makeup and displayed Gollivudskaya ulыбка, a Hollywood smile, which pointed out the economic status that was significantly higher than that of Aminapa's. As I joined the informal mosque lessons that Aminapa attended, I observed that she stood out among her peers in yet other ways. Many women came to the mosque lessons to learn how to recite the 5 daily prayers and read the Quran correctly. Some wanted to know how to conduct a certain ritual correctly, or what prayer to recite in a particular situation. Aminapa's questions for the teacher touched larger social issues, as if she was constantly thinking and looking for answers for questions that people would not think about ordinarily. Then in 2010, I learned that in addition to working in a factory, attending the madrasa and mosque lessons, Amina Appa frequently traveled to remote villages to visit or to help take care of a sick relative or friend. She also knew other Muslims who were in a difficult situation financially or otherwise, either large families with many children and no breadwinner, or families with a disabled family member, or an elderly sick person with no one to take care of. It was like there was this network of those who had some sort of need, and Amina Appa was part of it. It was back in 2010 when I realized that the local Ummah, practicing Muslims in and around Kazan, could symbolically be divided into multiple worlds. One, for example, was inhabited by such people like Amina Appa, financially and perhaps emotionally broken, at times culturally inappropriate and socially awkward. Another by her mosque lesson peers, who led significantly more stable lives, financially and otherwise. These worlds were not completely independent of one another, as was evidenced by the mosque lessons where Amina Appa and her peers were part of the same study group. I also had observed that when Amina Appa's peers wanted to give sadaqah or zakat, those are different forms of almsgiving. They often went to her as someone who had access to and was part of that other needy world. And so did I upon my return to Kazan this past summer. I knew that Amina Appa would help me deliver the friend's money to those who really needed it, and so I called her. Amina Appa and I agreed to meet at a small store where she now worked as a salesperson for the store's owner, or director as she referred to the store's owner. The store, only about 90 square feet and made out of glass panes, specialized in Muslim clothing, literature, and accessories, and was part of several small stores built in a row and adjacent to a newly constructed Targovy Center, or shopping mall, near one of Kazan's largest bazaars, and also close to a railway station. The whole area was part of the old Kazan area, where several old mosques, the Muhammadiyya madrasa, and many Muslim businesses, such as clothing stores or halal restaurants, were located. Populated with truly old buildings, this area of Kazan was part of the old Kazan that has not yet been touched by the Republic's official quest for Russia's third capital, a quest that demolished old but culturally significant buildings and houses in favor of state-of-the-art stadiums, hockey, and swimming palaces. Let me show you, to give you a feel for that area, let me show you a few pictures that I took. So this is the area. It was on a cloudy day when I took the pictures, but this is the area. This for example, is Targovy Center, one of the Targovy Center, or shopping mall in the area. So you see these houses are really old. They haven't been demolished. So this is another Targovy Center, and Amina Appa store was one of these stores. So they were made out of glass panes and adjacent to the big Targovy Center. So this is the area. This is inside the store. Like I said, the store was only about 90 square feet. And this is her, with her back toward me, but nonetheless. So Amina Appa's store was inconspicuous and could be easily lost in the hustle and bustle of the bazaar area. I had briefly visited Amina Appa in her store 2 years ago, but at the time, we quickly updated each other about changes in our lives, like old acquaintances would after not seeing each other for a long period of time. I thought nothing of the store, other than Amina Appa's new place of employment. I probably would not have thought about it differently this time around either, had I not spent at the store 2 consecutive hours during our first meeting this past summer. It was that first 2-hour meeting with Amina Appa at her store, followed by 3 more visits there, and trips to several mosques in and around Kazan that made me think about physical space, its importance for people who inhabit it, its relationship with the local communities, local ummahs, and its role in the production of a certain discursive space, multiple discourses and identities that it generates. While my original question that I posed to myself and Amina Appa during our first meeting, as will be evident in a minute, was about the state of the local ummah, As I listened to Amina, watched her interact with the store customers, and participated in some of the interactions myself, and as I experienced other physical religious spaces in and around Kazan, I realized that there was much more to ask and think about. In particular, the questions that I would like to raise and think about today in relation to Tatarstan and beyond, and I may not have answers to all of them today, are these. To what degree is religious space in general, and Tatarstan's religious space in particular, homogeneous? What and or who defines the local Ummah in both physical and discursive ways? What makes certain space sacred and a locus of morality and piety, Muslim or not? What is the relationship between discursive and physical space? Which discourses and identities are encouraged or discouraged through physical space? What do some of the ways people experience physical space? What do some of the ways that people experience physical space tell us about the larger social reality that they are part of? Similar questions have been raised before in other contexts. I draw the title of my presentation from Svetlana Peshkova's work on physical space and female religious leaders in Uzbekistan's Fergana Valley, particularly her recent book, Women, Islam and Identity, Public Life and Private Spaces in Uzbekistan, where Peshkova shows how local women create public life in the privacy of their homes, in light of Uzbekistan's laws that put strict limitations on public gatherings, particularly religious ones. As the title of my talk suggests, I seek to illustrate the opposite, how private life can take place in a physical space that we consider public, such as a store. A very recent issue of Contemporary Islam also explores how space, as a symbolic marker of identity, is about belonging, community, power, creation of meaning in the context of Muslim communities in the West. And while some studies have been done on religious space in present-day Tatarstan, for example, Kinosian's article on Kazan School Sharif Mosque as an example of political construction of cultural and religious heritage, I am unaware of ethnographic work that would focus on examining people's use of physical, particularly religious space and its relationship to the local Ummah, discourses, identities, what I seek to explore in this ethnographic project. Today I will focus on two case studies based on ethnographic sketches, interviews, and observations, which I hope will shed light on those questions that I posed earlier. One case study is Amina and her Muslim clothing store. Even though it's not her store, I refer to it as her store. And other a newly built mosque in a town just outside of Kazan. So upon my initial greetings, after my arrival at Amina store, she called a woman to whom she was going to pass the money that my friend had sent to me. "Is tomorrow okay?" Amina asked me while still on the phone. "Would it be okay if the woman comes tomorrow to take the money? She can't come today." "Sure, no problem," I said. To me, it didn't really matter when the money reached the family in need, as long as it did. Amina seemed to take the issue with a much more serious approach. When we had talked on the phone prior to meeting in person, Amina readily identified people she could pass the money on to. This particular woman was a single mother. One of her children was in a wheelchair, but managed to study at the Muhammadiyah Madrasa. There were other families, but this single mother needed the money the most at the time, as Amina explained to me. It turned out I was not the only one soliciting Amina's help in distributing sadaqah, or the alms money. During one of my later visits to the store, Amina's former classmate from the madrasa peeped into the door to hand Amina an envelope and said, "Don't get this mixed up. I need to start a notebook to write down how much money goes to whom," Amina said, explaining that the money was sadaqah for the needy. Despite her meager earnings, she herself refused to take sadaqah, arguing that sadaqah must go to those who don't have enough food to last for 3 days. But back to the store. After updating each other on recent changes in our lives, I expressed my surprise over the fact that I did not notice any halal food in regular grocery stores in Kazan. "On the surface, they can make a very good impression here," Amina said, referring to the way Kazan has lately been marketed as Russia's third capital and a center of traditional Islam. Seizing the opportunity to find out what was really happening in the Republic's capital, I asked, "How are Muslims and the Ummah doing?" Aminapa waved her hand in a protest as if she knew nothing and said, I don't know what's happening there in their Ummah because I don't have time. I'm here 5 days, work like a horse, and when I come home on my days off, I drop dead. But people come to me, share with me. This year I'm very happy, and our meeting took place during Ramadan. This year I'm very happy because I have my own regular customers. This is one thing. And this year they came before Ramadan and said, that's it, finally we're getting dressed. Meaning they're getting women, for example, came to her store to get dressed modestly, to assume Islamically religious dress, long dresses, long sleeves, and a scarf. One woman came and said, I want to get dressed. I have the urge. I can't help it. And here we have discussions. We talk. Another woman came. That's it. I recite namaz. A third woman came. And so many little surprises. I look and see that the leaflets with the Ramadan prayer schedule that we're sitting here have all been claimed. They ask to buy Quranic verses. I ask if they're going to fast. They say yes. Even those who don't recite namaz, who are not dressed Islamically. Me. Old or young, Aminapa, all, old and young, and the opinionated ones, those with whom we have knockdown, drag-out discussions, everyone. Me. Why did they come here if it's a Muslim clothing store after all? Aminapa. First they come here to buy, but I get surprised by people. They will stop here at my store. They won't buy anything, but spend about 4 hours talking about their lives. I have heard all kinds of things here. If you worked here, you would defend many dissertations. And you know, they come from different places. They're not from Kazan only. They come from those Russian regions where Russians harass Muslims pretty heavily. Me, what regions? Aminapa. Historically Russian places, Novgorod, Perm, Sibir, and others. At the same time, these Russians come. One of them visited my store recently and said, there are so many bearded men here. I tell them, why you call them Wahhabis? You know, they call them Wahhabis, the bearded men. They say, no. And I tell them that your beard is what makes you a man. A beard is what distinguishes you from a woman. I say, you don't have a beard. Where is proof that you're a man? He started thinking. I tell him, Russians also used to wear beards. So different people, travelers pass by and stop by the store. And those on the bikes who have grown hair all over and beards, she was referring to bikers. So I say all peoples used to wear a beard. It's normal. Peter the Great shaved everyone. So very different, and this is all Aminapa talking. So very different talks take place here. Everyone wants to talk about their thing. And priests stop by, and old believers, and Catholics, and old Orthodox Christians. They buy clothes here to go to church. Me, really, women? Aminapa, yes, women, they buy scarves. They have their own holidays. One old believer came and said, we even pray like you. We hit our forehead against the floor, like us. And we pray at night, she says. I wanted to talk to her, but I had an old lady customer, so there wasn't an opportunity for a deep conversation. And the woman was in a hurry. They were preparing for a church service. Recently, Orthodox Christian girls stopped by, and we also talked about religion. Naturally, everyone promotes their point of view. And then she tells me about the kind of conversation she had with these Christian girls. And then she says, so this Christian girl tells me that she talked to the father, Batushka, and asked him to explain why a newborn is born with a sin. I can't understand, she says. And then she tells me what she told, how she explained religiously from the Islamic point of view to the girl that it was that it was not true belief. We talked with her for 2 hours. Foreigners also come. Jews stop by. Everyone you can imagine. So in the first 15 minutes of our conversation, Aminapa marked the physical space of her store, the here, as very different from there, where a different their Ummah existed. Hers was a place where people of all ages, backgrounds, and opinions came, originally to buy something, but often stayed to talk and opened up about something. Just when Aminapa was finishing telling me about all kinds of people who came to her store, A woman in her mid to late 50s walked in. Conversing in Tatar, she asked Aminapa to show her a shama'il, a piece of Muslim art that often featured elaborate calligraphy, usually ayats from the Quran, and or pictures of Mecca and the holy place of the Kaaba. And here's a picture of, so those framed pieces, those are shama'ils. Shama'il. As Aminapa was going through a collection of shama'ils she had at her store for sale, she was reciting and translating the meaning of the ayats featured on them. But what the woman was paying attention to, first and foremost, was the size and the color. She needed a piece that would go well with her wallpaper, she explained. At that point, Aminapa turned to me and said, in disappointment, "They choose shama'ils based on the color of their walls." A comment that the customer overheard and responded with, "What is there to do? There are a lot of options out there today." The woman then declared that she could not decide which shama'il to buy and would stop by the store on her way back from another place. But then something else happened. Instead of leaving, the woman suddenly said in Tatar, and the whole conversation was code switching between Tatar, Russian, and Arabic. So the woman suddenly said in Tatar, "I never started reciting namaz. My mother urged me to start reciting namaz so adamantly. She went to a mosque on a regular basis, read the Quran." While the woman was talking, Aminapa turned to me and said, you see, no matter how hard one can try to invite another person to Islam, if Allah doesn't open one's heart," as if agreeing that Allah hasn't opened her heart yet, the old lady jumped in. "I don't know, I learned the ayats, but I can't force myself to recite the Quran." Aminapa, No, you don't need heaven. You already live in heaven. You don't need heaven." The woman laughed out loud and said, "You will enter heaven, that's good enough." Aminapa, "When a local bazaar burned, you were not in a rush to go in there, were you?" The woman, "I have never been there. I don't even know where it is." Aminapa, "Will you rush to get out of there if there is fire?" "You're rushing now." The woman, "Yes, I am rushing." I intervened to ask the woman how old she was. She said 56. Upon hearing that, Aminapa voiced out loud a common attitude that exists among Tatars of that generation. "I will begin reciting namaz when I will retire." Aminapa then continued, "Many old ladies stop by here and tell me that they're going to start reciting namaz when they retire, but then admit that they have not started even upon retiring." The woman responded, "We do not recite namaz. We were brought up learning about atheism. I still have 3 books on atheism at home." Aminapa, "Why do you still keep them?" The woman, "They used to be the most important books in our home. I have a hard time partying with them." Aminapa, "That's why Allah doesn't open your heart." The woman, "Maybe I should throw them out." Aminapa, "Burn them." The woman, "When I needed them, I looked for them all over Kazan back in the day." Aminapa, "Would you look for the Quran the same way?" The woman, "Today the Quran is easily available, thank God. I bought it right away, went and bought." Aminapa, "Burn down those books. Maybe Allah will help you then." The woman, "I probably should burn them. Actually, maybe I threw them away already. We used to read them. It was that kind of time. We read them." Aminapa, "Those are the books from the devil." The woman, "They are, but what are you going to do?" At which point, the woman switched the subject back to shama'ils and said, "Okay, so how much for this one? The green one?" 900 rubles, Aminapa responded. "Okay, I will stop on my way back," the woman said. "Please do," responded Aminapa. When the woman left, Aminapa said to me, "That's how it happens. They come and go. There are many travelers." Or, "I will show you little Johnny." And then she told me about this young man from Holland whose grandmother was Tatar. She showed me his pictures and she told me about him visiting the store. So as the episode above illustrated, in the course of 10 minutes or so, the customer, instead of leaving the store, opened up about a very private matter, about not reciting namaz, without any solicitation from Aminapa. Perhaps somewhat accustomed to such case of self-disclosure, Aminapa seized the opportunity to engage in da'wah, or dawah, a call or an invitation to Islam. an obligation and a moral duty, as she later described herself. Indeed, as I found out in the course of our first and 3 consecutive meetings at the store, Amina Appa talked about Islam, Allah, the importance of prayer, modest clothing, fasting, and other religious things often. But she also talked about 2 things over and over again, the importance of doing good and the ability to forgive. I observed her do that during our last visit when Amina Appa engaged in a special ritual with a young couple that came to her store to buy clothing for their nikah, a Muslim religious ceremony. During our first meeting, Amina Appa had told me about the tradition that she had, a ritual of sorts. When a young couple came to buy clothes for the special ceremony, after getting them dressed, she asked if the young couple had 15 minutes and 30 rubles. She then proceeded to tell them about the importance of predestination and the unique opportunity that Allah gave people on their wedding day, the power to change their predestination. Using animal metaphors, she told the couple about the importance of treating each other with dignity and carrying one's load in life without dumping it on the partner. She said, pointing to the bride, you're not her donkey, and then pointing to the groom, you're not her camel, so don't carry your load. She talked about the importance of doing good, not harming anyone, and the ability to forgive. She ended the ritual by giving the couple 3 small religious books and asked them to read those books before their marriage, so they know what to ask from God on their special day. One of the books cost 30 rubles, and she added that to the clothing bill. The other 2 books were a gift from her. And these are the books, the exact books. So one is 99 Names of Allah, the other is the book about how to recite namaz, and the third one is a small prayer for travelers. Don't waste this opportunity, she told the young couple. I was searching for it when I was 17, but it was not given to me. I was looking for it, searching for it, asking Allah, but it was not given to me because they were afraid. There was the regime, and now you're welcome to it. The doors of knowledge are now open. Allah has opened it all for you. Go, learn, take the knowledge. So I would like to end my ethnographic description of Amina Appa's store, really a tiny snippet of what I have observed and became a witness to during my 4 visits to the store, with her response to my original question about the Ummah. About an hour into our first meeting at the store, Amina Appa abruptly changed the topic from her own unrealized hopes for a forever marriage. Her narrative below reveals the importance of the physical space of the store for herself and others. Amina Appa said, and now about Tatars and our Ummah. I will tell you the essence. Among the people of my social circle and among my regular customers here at the store, we all talk. People from everywhere stop by here. There is an illusion that is created here. As if we talk, as if to have a heart-to-heart. They come to me and say, even my own mom doesn't know about what I have just told you. You are the only one whom I told. Me. People trust you, Amina Appa. Why do people trust me? Because I wear a headscarf? Just yesterday, there was a woman who stopped by to share her story. She said, don't tell anyone. I'm telling you because you have an angel-like voice. I tell her, have you heard angels talk? She hasn't heard the angels talk. She just needed to talk things out. And so they come, and there is an illusion here. And for me, the reason I don't leave this place, even though I was made several offers to go elsewhere, is that I am my own boss here. When it's time for namaz, I can lock the door and recite namaz. A customer came and left. I finished working with the customer. I take the Quran and read the Quran, and no one interrupts me. No music, no passers-by. And those other big stores that are located in the supermarket, there are different working conditions there. Even though it is cold here in the winter, and I get cold, I don't mind. It gets very hot here in the summer, and I don't mind because Allah gives me an opportunity to recite the Quran here. That's number 1. Number 2, I have heard so much here. Such life stories. You know Sholokhov wrote his Tihi Don and Quiet Flows the Dawn, or Судьба человека, Destiny of a Man. It's written off of a person's words. One cannot make it up. It's impossible. Really, they were described the destinies that people have lived through. And here, one Sholokov would not be enough, based on what I have heard here. My ethnographic description, again a tiny snippet above, attempted to illustrate that the physical space of Aminalpa's store served multiple functions at the same time. In addition to its primary one of being a Muslim store, it was a place of charity where people would bring money for the needy. It was a place for delivering or receiving dagvat, an invitation to Islam. It was a place of worship where Aminalpa recited namaz. It was a place of study. She studied the Quran there and sold books for others to study. It was a place of spiritual intimacy and safe disclosure. As such, the public space of the store was the locus of private lives, morality, and spirituality, Muslim or not. The discourses that took place in Aminalpa's store, including her own, were defined, but also defined the very physical space of the store, an observation that Peshkova also made in relation to Uzbek Muslim women's use of their homes. I finally suggest that ultimately the physical and discursive space of the store constituted the local Ummah. In the course of a month and a half, I met with Aminalpa at her store 4 times. I also visited several mosques in and around Kazan. My other case study is a newly built mosque in a small town of about 100 residents, about 30 miles outside of Kazan. While a mosque is a very different kind of space from that of a Muslim store, what I learned about and observed at the mosque pushed me to think about physical and discursive space, piety, and Ummah further. So I visited the town in 2010 when the mosque's construction was underway. And here is a picture of the mosque in 2010. Even though the majority of the town's population was ethnically Russian, the only 2 existing mosques at the time were located in the town's outskirts and were too small to accommodate the local population's growing interest in Islam. The new mosque located in the town center was supposed to meet this need. Even though the town administration allocated a plot of land for the mosque's construction back in 2001, the construction itself did not truly begin until 2007. And this picture, it was taken in 2010, like I said. Even then, it took almost 7 years to finish the entire building, and the mosque finally opened its doors last fall. During my visit in 2010, I heard about financial difficulties associated with the construction of the mosque. It was built on private money exclusively, and local pensioners contributed 100 rubles from their meager monthly pensions to a special fund created to collect the money for the mosque's construction. A town that was once a center of military industry was now struggling financially, and most residents' income was about half of those living in Kazan. Despite that, when upon my return this summer, I met with the imam of the mosque, he proudly showed me around. With a capacity to fit at least 1,000 worshippers in the men's prayer hall, in addition to the balcony dedicated to women, the mosque featured the latest elements of Evroremont, a type of interior and exterior design that was believed to be of a European standard and thus high quality. The mosque also featured separate cloakrooms for men and women, 2 spacious dining halls for special occasions such as fast-breaking ceremonies during Ramadan, iftars, a special room to conduct religious ceremonies such as the nikah, a room to be eventually developed into a museum of religion in the town, an imam's office, and other quarters. So this is what the mosque looks like now. And this picture was taken by Naila Akhmedzanova, to whom I give credit. This is the men's prayer hall. This is the cloakroom. The imam was particularly proud of the light in the ceiling and the mirror reflection in the ceiling. Bathrooms. At the end of the tour, Imam proudly showed me a stand in the hallway which featured a blueprint of what the mosque and the surrounding areas were envisioned to be and eventually developed into. Eventually, there was supposed to be a school And this is a close-up. So eventually there was supposed to be, so this is the building, the building of the mosque itself that was built, but this area was dedicated to the entire religious complex. So eventually there was supposed to be a mosque, a store for halal food and religious literature, benches for people to sit and enjoy the area, the trees. This building was supposed to be, eventually supposed to be a dormitory and also a place for certain religious ceremonies such as washing of the deceased. And this was supposed to be, eventually supposed to be eco parking.
What does it mean?
Eco parking, it's like a lawn and where you can park, but it's green, it's nice, it's covered with grass. So we can still enjoy it and park there at the same time. And this picture was taken from the, I pulled it from the local newspaper. The Imam was not only proud but optimistic. After all, he told me that he had shown his plans in a formal presentation to the Republic's and town's administration and received very enthusiastic responses and promises of support. I too left impressed. A few days later, I met the Imam's wife at a friend's place. I had met her in 2010, and we were glad to have a chance to see each other again and to update each other on the changes in our lives. I told her how impressed I was with the new mosque. The wife, however, looked distraught and proceeded to describe a dilemma that her husband has run into. When I visited the mosque a few days earlier, I noticed that the unused land that was part of the land plot belonging to the mosque, and that was later to be developed into a public religious space, currently served as a parking lot. So at this time, this land right here, it's undeveloped. So the mosque was using it as a parking lot. The mosque rented out this parking space to residents of the newly constructed apartment buildings nearby in order to pay bills and small salaries. And I will show you. Here you can see these new apartment buildings. They were not there in 2010. One right here, one here. According to the Imam's wife, during a weekly town meeting, the head of the city administration collected the Imam and gave him a date by which the parking lot had to be gotten rid of because it was too unsightly. When the Imam protested, saying that the Muslim community barely had the money to pay the bills and the parking lot served as the only reliable source of income at the time, the head of the town administration, and here I quote the Imam's wife who quoted her husband's quoting the town administration. So this is what he said: "I can't believe our town's Muslim community will not be able to support its own mosque." And then he looked at the Imam and said, "You are closer to God than I am. Ask him for help." The Imam's wife repeated these exact words several times as if in disbelief. Unlike the head of the town administration, the Imam envisioned the mosque not just as part of the local Ummah, the Muslim community, but part of the entire town. It was evident in an article in the town's newspaper where the Imam appealed to the town's both Muslim and non-Muslim populations to support the mosque and the surrounding area as something that the entire city, the entire town could enjoy and benefit from. The Imam was distraught, as was his wife. One of Imam's main jobs was to do constant fundraising from the town's Muslim population and local businessmen. So far, he managed to collect 35 million rubles, the amount of money it took to build the mosque. And he told me he needed another 5 million to finish basic work around it. When I called the Imam's wife a few weeks ago to ask what was happening with the mosque and the land surrounding it, she told me that the parking lot has been closed. The Imam was no longer making plans for further development of the religious complex, but was swamped with administrative and physical work that needed to be done to prepare the mosque's main building for the winter season. On special nights that carried religious significance in Islam, the mosque's prayer halls were full. A Muslim could go and perform a prayer there during the day, but from what I could tell, the physical space of the mosque produced a very different kind of spirituality, piety, and discourse. from those I observed at Amina Appa's store. More collective, ritualized, rehearsed, separated along gender lines, and thus, to an extent, more regulated. It was also a source of power and contestation. And other than during prayer times and special Muslim holidays, for now, the mosque stood largely empty. I do not know if this was due to the fact that the construction of the mosque and the surrounding areas was not completely finished, or due to the fact that the mosque, while technically open to the public, was still very new and was not prayed into, ninamolina, it's a special term, as both Christians and Muslims in Russia refer to a church or mosque that has housed multiple generations of people who went there to pray. Or perhaps it was due to the fact that as places that have become official and that institutionalized religious spaces, mosques were often treated as part of their Ummah, as to paraphrase Amina Appa. I have observed that it was particularly the case with mosques that had a high profile and were highly visible in the public eye. Whatever the case may be, the newly constructed mosque that struggled to survive, an Amina Appa store that was rarely empty, while both public spaces generated different kinds of discourses, communities, and identities. They required different types of commitment, produced different social relations, encouraged different modes of piety, offered different ways of belonging and orienting oneself towards others, and thus produced different social realities, different social and moral worlds. A few months after leaving Kazan, I called Amina Appa to find out how she was doing. She told me that her store had been temporarily shut down because it was not making enough money for her director to keep it open due to the approaching cold season and a high heating bill. Amina Appa told me that she continued to work for the director's family at a similar Muslim store that was located within Nurullah Mosque, a few blocks away, the mosque where I first met Amina Appa in 2010. I was surprised to learn about the closing of Amina Appa's store and immediately started thinking about what kinds of discourses, communities, identities, spiritualities, if any, the new physical space that was part of an old mosque would produce. But then a few minutes into our conversation, Amina Appa told me in a very enthusiastic way, "Do you have a few minutes? This woman I once knew has just come by to see me. I have such a story to tell you." Thank you.
Thank you.